Well, hello there, and welcome to WhiteRose Fellowship Church Online. This week it got a little cold, so we had to schedule church online this week. So we're glad that you could join us online, and my name is Shane House. I'm the pastor here at WhiteRose Fellowship. First, we have a few announcements, and then we'll get into a short message. I want to thank everybody for the time off that we were able to get as a house family on vacation and the wonderful gift we got for Christmas. It was very much appreciated, and we enjoy that very much. So thank you so much to be able to recharge the batteries. Also, we had to reschedule the food pantry. We are going to do that next weekend, Saturday the 20th, and I assume we'll go back with the 28th or the 27th as well. And so we'll have back-to-back weeks with the food pantry due to the cold weather. We weren't able to get food in. We also weren't able to get just due to the cold and things, we didn't want people out and about. That's kind of like today, right? It's -2 for the high and just a little dangerous if the car breaks down out on the road. That's what we're thinking about as a church. Additionally, next Sunday, the 21st, we are going to reschedule the potluck for the 21st. So I'm happy to say that we are not going to cancel that potluck, but we're going to reschedule that. And so we're excited to let you know that we'll do that right after the service on the 21st. So thank you so much for that as well. As we get into the Bible study, I wanted to point out the thing that I've been wrestling with Ephesians. When we got to Ephesians end of chapter 3 and we start into chapter 4, there's this duality. I don't know if that's the right word. There's this conflict, or there's this reckoning. That's the word I'm looking for. There's this reckoning that comes with theology and putting it into practice, putting your faith into practice. And so we have to come to the recognition that first, that I am not God. I am broken, I'm a sinner, and I need to be saved by His grace. 2, God is awesome. God has not sinned. God knows the plan for my life. I need to recognize that I need to surrender to that plan. That's the theology that we've come to when we are first saved, when we are justified in our faith, and then we can put that into practice by being unified in the body, by coming together as Christians, by being good husbands, as being good citizens, by being good employees, and putting on our full armor of God. And that's the end of Ephesians. And so I was thinking, is there other places in the Bible that we see this coming of theology and then putting it into practice? And I went to one of my favorite passages of scriptures in Judges chapter 6, and I looked at the story of Gideon. And Gideon, you see in chapter 6, is a man that is threshing grain over in a wine press. Now, a wine press is designed to keep the air and the dust out. And so to be pressing, to be throwing up grain and working to thresh it in there would be ridiculous. But he is hiding from the Midianites. The Midianites have come in, it says, like locusts, and they have destroyed all of Israel, all their crops. They've destroyed. They pick them out every year that they're planted. They've taken all their livestock, and they have so many camels that can't be counted. And it is a formidable enemy, and they're not sure how they're going to do this. And you see this man Gideon in there threshing grain in a wine press, because that's the only place he can do it to save his grain and to feed his family without getting caught. And so you see God coming to Gideon, and he says to him, "Mighty hero, the Lord is with you." Now, where do we find Gideon again? We find him in a wine press, hiding, scared, and probably alone. We also find out later he's the least in his family and from one of the least tribes in Israel, and he is scared. And so what do we have here? God says, mighty hero. Well, that's just, I always look at these and say, well, that's an oxymoron. It's sarcasm. That's ridiculous. How can that be? And I think That's also what Gideon says, but Gideon points to the Lord. He says, Lord, where's the God who brought us out of Egypt? Why has God abandoned us? Why has God turned us over to these Midianites? And you see that Gideon has a crisis of theology first. He has a crisis of faith, and he has to line it up before he can put his faith into practice, just like we see in the book of Ephesians. And so he asks, why have you abandoned us? Why have you turned us over to the Midianites? And where are you? Where's the God I've read about? Where's the God I've heard about that came out of Egypt, that's done the miracles, that's saved us from our enemies so many times? Where have you been? And the Lord affirms this crisis of faith, and he says, go with the strength that you have. How interesting. God tells us to go with the strength that we have. Specifically here, Gideon. And he says, go and rescue the Israel from the Midianites, for I am sending you. He is recognizing Gideon's lack of strength. He is recognizing Gideon's, he's tended to be very fearful and lacking courage to overcome that fear. And it is at this point we find out how faithful that Gideon is, because he is willing to overcome his fear. First, with his family, he goes to the Asherah pole of the tribe, and he chops it down. He kills an animal sacrifice and gives it to the Lord, and he turns the house back to the Lord. And the people rejoice. No, that's not true. The people are ready to stone him. They're ready to kill him. And his father comes out and says, hey, if Baal and Asherah have a problem with this, then have them come down. Has not Gideon done this in the name of the Lord? Surely they can defend themselves. And so they wait, and Baal does not come. And so Gideon starts to get the support, and he decides via the Lord that God tells him to go and take on the Midianites. And so he gathers up 22,000 troops, and God says that's too many against these hundreds of thousands of troops that are against you. Because if you do it with the 22,000, then everybody's going to know that it is not by your faith that you did this, but it is by your own hand and your own strength. So go down to the river, and anybody who draws up water with their hand and keeps their vision out over the field, I want them to be your people that you go with. And so after he's turned away the people that are afraid, he sends them home. He's left with 10,000 or so, 12,000. And then as he picks the people that draw to their mouth, he's left with 300 people. Only 300 people. And God says, that'll do. And so he takes those 300, he equips them with a torch and a couple of pots. And when he gets out there, Gideon's got to go through a crisis of faith. Again, he puts his fleece out, as we know. He puts out, if you're still scared, go down to the enemy camp, and you're going to hear about this guy's dream. That's surely is Gideon and what he has done for them. And so he has the courage to take these 300 men, and they surround these hundreds of thousands of people. They reveal their torches when the cry goes for Gideon and for the Lord, and they smash their pots, and chaos ensues that night. And the camp, since there were three major other armies, they go and they kill one another, and if they try to escape out of that, then the 300 men take care of them. There's a major victory. The people are returned to the Lord. The people are successful. They get out of this oppression from the Midianites, and we see this great victory. And I'd like to say that's where it stays, and it does stay that way for Gideon, but it doesn't for Israel. They fall back into their practices. And so that brings up this question. When we have this crisis of faith that is theological, and then we go to put it into practical, how can we get those to come together and move forward? Well, we're going to find that out in Ephesians, but I also found that out in another place. There's another place in Malachi that I read about. In Malachi chapter 3, verses 2 through 4, he talks about a silversmith. It says, "But who will be able to endure it when he comes?" Speaking of the Lord in the last days. "But who will be able to stand and face him when he appears? For he will be like a blazing fire that refines metal, or like a strong soap that bleaches clothes. He will sit like a refiner of silver, burning away the dross. He will purify the Levites, refining them like gold and silver, so they may once again offer acceptable sacrifices to the Lord. Then once more the Lord will accept the offerings brought to him by the people of Judah and Jerusalem, as he did in the past." Now we see these three things here. We see a refiner of gold and silver. And what does that look like? We'll get into in a minute. And then we see him refining them with this bleaches and soaps. And he's going to turn them pure white. And he's taking them white as snow, as would say in Revelation. And we're left with this conflict once again of how do we get from the theological to the practical, and it's this refining process that God brings us into. He brings us into trial. He brings us into the hard times, and in the hard times, God leaves us in the fire. Just like the silversmith does, he takes a long rod and he holds it into the flame, and he holds it into the hottest part where it's white hot, and he holds it in that flame. And if he goes too much, then he's ruined the silver. If he hasn't gone enough, it is still not purified. The dross hasn't burned off. And you're asking, well, how long does the Lord know that he needs to hold us in there? How long is he going to keep us in that fire, in that flame? When he can look as the Creator and see into that flame, and he sees the reflection like a mirror on that silver, and he can see his face in the silver, then he knows that he can pull us back out of the fire, back out of the flames, and draw us close to him again, because we have been refined in his image. Folks, when he burns his image on our hearts like he does the silver that's in the fire, then we can do great things for the Lord. When we choose to step out of the fire, step out of the trial, step out and do our own thing, or we fall short on the theological side and we don't move to the practical side, we will never be refined to be the tool, to be the unit that God wants us to be in that refined silver. So I want to encourage you, WhiteRose, or whoever's watching, that we want to reflect the image of Christ. And that starts with good theology first, and then taking that faith and putting it into practice. Both are necessary. Both are rewarding. Thank you for watching, and God bless you on this Sunday.